All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen White. I'm part of the data success team in the University Technology Office. And I have my colleagues, Bob Sookvong and Kenvin Raymond with me this morning as well. Bob is also on my team. I'm sure many of you know him. And Kenvin is part of our data solutions team. And so they've both been very involved with my reports support in the past and have a lot of knowledge as well on this topic. So we've been working together on formulating this plan and trying to implement this. I should also mention my boss, Brandy Falls, who's the director of the data analytics at UTO. She's been very instrumental in overseeing this retirement project, helping with all of the planning and the resources, et cetera. Some of you may have seen the survey that went out recently, and we'll talk about all of the details today of where we're at with the retirement, everything that's involved, as well as introducing a new thing called the Data Analytics Success Hub. Before we get too far into it, I actually wanted to start with a poll to kind of gauge the sentiment in the room. There are a lot of people in different places, and so I wanted to go ahead and kick it off and see how everyone feels now. And then as we go through all of the details and explain everything, I kind of want to gauge whether or not, how much we've helped, whether or not we've sort of changed anyone's mind and put you at ease and hopefully dispel some of the worries that are out there. So if we could, let's go ahead and fire up the first poll.
All right, you guys should all see it, with the exception of Stephen and Bob.
All right.
So there's the results.
Yeah, so thank you. The top answer was, I'm struggling to get out. The good news is that means you're trying. So you're on the right track and you're in the right place. Definitely want to help out with those people who are struggling, especially. And about a quarter of you are already ready to see it turned off. So that's great also. Thank you, Delaney.
You bet.
All right, so let's start by talking about sort of the timeline and what's going on from a high level. So first of all, why is MyReports being retired in the first place? As many of you know, MyReports is out of support. It was an Oracle product that for many years now has not had any updates, any security patches, and so there undoubtedly are some vulnerabilities and we're not getting any new features or fixes. And so that's one of the main reasons that we are doing our best to move to current supported tools. We know that there is a lot of content already there, so it is going to be obviously a difficult, big process. So we're well aware of that. But we do need to move to new tools. And so the UTO leadership has decided that now is the time. We've been talking about it for a long time, but we actually need to just buckle down and get it done finally. There's also a large cost involved to continue running those servers in addition to everything else that we're running. So it is redundant in a sense, and so that's another consideration for moving off of it. What are we moving to? I'll be going into more specifics on the tools and technologies that are involved, but there's no one single tool that does everything. So I'll be explaining the tools that are available and which tools you might want to choose depending on your skill level and what you're trying to do. In terms of timeline, our projected goal is to finish the migration and shut off by the end of fiscal year 21. So around April would really be a reasonable target to try to make sure you have the majority of your content out, as that's when we'll be scaling back access, resources, and sort of doing a phased shut-off approach. About 300 of you were involved in a survey over the last couple of weeks. This was mostly people who are subject matter experts and have been sort of publishing shared content in some of the shared folders. We reviewed about 36,000 reports and asked for feedback on those. Our main goal with that survey was to sort of gauge how many of those reports really need to be brought over versus ones that are obsolete and can be let go. We're also trying to gauge how much work those 300 content creators feel comfortable doing on their own versus how much help they need from our team. And so we're just now wrapping that up, and we'll be going through the results of that soon. Over the next few weeks, we'll be sending out one last survey to people who may not have published content, but may have content in the users folder. We know that there's a lot of reports that people have in their users folder that's not necessarily just private, but they may be sort of sharing or publishing that to a relatively limited audience, but still using that as sort of an enterprise reporting solution to an extent. And so we'll be doing a similar survey with that content to find out how much of that needs to be migrated and how much work there is to do in terms of what people need help with from the data analytics team. Probably sometime in December or by the end of the year, certainly we should have a really good idea of the scope of the work that's involved. And then we'll be following up with more specifics on tracking the progress of the people that are able to do some of that work on their own, and also prioritizing and divvying up the work that needs to be done so we can partner with the teams that need help and have critical reports. Obviously, we don't want to leave anyone behind. We don't want to shut off any reports that you need to do your job. But of course, we do have to balance that with making progress and moving forward as we move towards our April goal. And so we'll want to see consistent progress with migrating reports out and archiving the reports that are left there. Just to give a little bit more specifics on the timeline, again, I've been working with our director, Brandy Falls, on trying to keep up to speed with these different sort of phases as we move forward. So we are on track with the work that we began around October. So right now we're doing that My Reports retirement communication, and then especially starting January through March is when we'll really be focused on the actual migration work and doing a lot of that, tedious work where the rubber meets the road of actually building queries and reports and moving things. Starting in April, like I mentioned, people who are not actively migrating content will start losing their access. So in other words, you'll no longer be going to My Reports to run reports or consume content, but rather you'll be using the published content in analytics instead. And then that final sort of cleanup from the subject matter experts will wrap up around May, and then a final archive and shut off in June. So that's the goal. Before we move forward, I'll go ahead and pause there for a moment. If anyone wants to jump in with any questions on the timing or any high-level concerns, feel free to jump in right now.
Hey, Stephen, this is Kim Beckert from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. One of the questions I've had on this is when you guys have a user contact you and say, hey, I'm not, they're not like an analyst, they're not, data savvy, somebody built a query for them. And they're saying they do need to use it and they'd like some help migrating. How do you guys decide whether you build that on analytics as like a pre-built report, or you suggest them getting a BI desktop, like, and accessing Hyperion and just simply migrating it that way. Like, will you guys ever suggest that? Or, because we're going to have a lot of users in our college, so I'm just trying to figure out how to help them figure out what their options are.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. That's a great question. We've actually received, similar variations on that theme from several people, so it's definitely a big consideration. I will be sharing a link later on at the end to a resource, which is our sort of frequently asked questions page, and we've tried to address it there. But just to address it right now as well, we would kind of look at that in a few different phases. So first of all, typically the kind of person who's looking to run a report like that is not just necessarily the subject matter expert. So first of all, we would see if whoever owns that data or is the expert in that data has a pre-built report that they're publishing on analytics. And if so, we would direct you to use that, because all you have to do is select your filters, run the report, download it, and you're good to go. If no such report exists, then we would look at partnering with you to help you build that if necessary. And as a last resort, if there's no suitable report and you do not have the time or the skills or whatever to build it yourself, then our team would take that on and do our best to prioritize and provide a report that meets your needs.
But on analytics, so would you ever recommend that they get a BI desktop? Because we're running into the same thing as we're helping. We have kind of our own set of decision points of whether or not we recommend someone get one, but it sounds like that's not going to be a recommendation.
So the BI desktop would be for someone who has the time and sort of the skill set to do that work and learn some tools, because obviously there is some technical work involved in creating a report, just like there would have been trying to join up tables in my reports. So we would take that on a case-by-case basis depending on the needs involved. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward. So I do want to mention that while this is all going on, we also have another migration. Again, I'm sure many of you are aware of this, but just to touch on it, the data warehouse, ASU Enterprise Data Warehouse, is currently moving from Oracle to Amazon Redshift in AWS. And so this has been in progress for a while. Many of the tables are now available in Redshift. So for example, a lot of the student related tables, financial, census, and a few other data areas are now available. And so the people who manage some of those enterprise-wide data sets have started migrating their content to Redshift over the past month or so. And so over the next 6 months or so, the data warehouse team is planning on having everything available in Redshift that was available in Oracle. So as you are involved in migration efforts out of my reports, it's definitely worth being aware that it may be worth your time to also switch your queries to point to Redshift at the same time. So you're kind of doing 2 migrations at once. That way you don't have to redo additional work in the near future. So just something to be aware of as we move forward. All right, so in terms of where we're going, like I mentioned, we do have several tools involved, and we do have a lot of training resources and materials involved. And you don't necessarily have to go out and get a BI desktop right now. Depending on your use case, many of you will not necessarily need to be learning new tools and creating content from scratch. So one of the things I'd like to introduce is a system called the Data Analytics Success Hub, or DASH for short. I'm sorry if that name is confusing. It's the best I could come up with. We went through a few different names and this is what stuck, so we're going with it. So Dash is going to be a collection of enriched data sets that are easy to consume in many different tools and available in several different formats so that you can consume them in different ways depending on your needs. So for example, if you want to build a report that uses one of these data sets, you'll be able to simply point your report to a pre-built table and go from there and sort of build your own visualization or your own pivots on top of it without having to build a query from scratch. If you prefer to use Excel and don't necessarily want or need a BI desktop, you'll be able to connect directly to these data sets from Excel directly from your computer. Yesterday, we did a session with Kristen Kennedy on how to use Power Query. If you were there, so you know that this was mentioned. If not, and you're interested, it would be worth going back and listening to that, or at least downloading the lab for it so that you can get instructions on how to connect. Now, this is a relatively new concept, so we don't have any data sets out there as of today, but we are actively working with several different groups to get admissions, student, and other data area data sets in here so that you'll be able to start consuming these soon.
We do have a question out there, part of which was answered, but Rachel Jin asked, will all the current tables in Oracle database move to the Amazon Redshift, with the response of the warehouse team is moving most of the current PM prod Oracle tables to Redshift, but the follow-up question, how will they determine what tables are moved? And I don't know that we have all those answers here, but maybe you could touch on that a little bit,
Yeah, of course.
Stephen?
Sure. All of the sort of critical tables that are used regularly are being moved. The few exceptions are tables that were not being used, and the data warehouse has done a lot of analysis on which tables are needed. So for the most part, any table that's being referenced, you're going to have, in Redshift.
And Kevin did also pipe in to say that their data warehouse team does do the analysis, like you said, on the table when they're working with teams on specific data areas. So to answer the question, Rachel, most of those tables should be there. If there are any concerns of the tables, probably at the end we can touch base on what the contacts are and that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, so Jason Green is the director of that group, and he would be a good point of contact if needed, if you're unable to find a table there that you're expecting. So just to reiterate, the Data Analytics Success Hub will have its own landing page on analytics. So when you go to that landing page, you'll be able to explore the data sets that are available. And here's a preview of what that will look like. This landing page is under construction. I do have a link to it in the resources at the end, but it's under construction at the moment. My colleague Tan Tai is our web developer who's putting this together. And we got some great design input from Maggie Rome on sort of the look and feel of it. So she helped make it look way better than I could have. So we really appreciate that help as well. So you'll be able to explore the data sets and also view the documentation surrounding them. This is just a sample of what the documentation might look like. We'll be adding some additional details. But the point is, when you're looking through these data sets, we want you to be able to find the data set that meets your use case specifically. We want you to understand very clearly what the granularity of the data set is, the use cases it's intended for, some information about where the data comes from, who owns the data, etc. So that way you have all the information you need to make an informed decision on whether or not this is the right data for you, for your report, for your use case. And once you find the data set that you want, you'll be able to easily connect to it and get right to delivering results. And so some of the sort of core underlying data sets that we know about, like student enrollment or something like the admissions master list, those kinds of things we want to make readily available to you so that you don't necessarily have to go do any query building or table joining. You can just start with that, filter it right to your college or your department or whatever kind of filters you want, and get right to delivering numbers. And of course, we also want to consolidate business logic. So one of the great things about this approach is that if the underlying business logic changes, say for example, a new campus comes online and you're not sure what the description should be, you don't necessarily need to go ask someone anymore. It will just show up in your data set as soon as students start applying for classes in that campus. This also allows us to sort of use one source of truth. So we're going to end up having many reports using these same underlying data sets. And so when numbers change each day, the goal is that all of the different reports using these same underlying data sources have the same numbers. And so we're all in alignment on the definitions and the numbers we're looking at. All of this information will be documented in Calibra. So what you're seeing here, what you will see on the website is actually just a window into what's actually stored in Calibra. So that will be our data governance source of truth. Everything will be documented in there. And so you'll be able to actually explore the same data through Calibra or through this sort of portal landing page. All right, so let's move on to some specific tools. We kind of differentiate 4 different user levels, so to speak. These have kind of been around for a while, but I'll briefly touch on these for anyone who this is relatively new to. So a data citizen is someone who mostly wants to go to a report, maybe pick a couple of filters and click run, and you have your results. Or you may even just have a business analyst that maybe delivers reports to you. And so for you, the primary tool that you would be using is the analytics portal, the analytics website. All of the published enterprise-wide content is there from all of the different subject matter experts around the university. And so that's where you would primarily go to find a report, preferably bookmark your favorite reports, and you can just pick your filters and run it. A data apprentice is someone who maybe does a little bit of preparation work or maybe puts together some charts or some pivots, mostly using Excel. So these 2 levels most likely will not need a workspace, a BI desktop. They'll be able to just use the analytics website and Excel in conjunction. Again, in Excel, you'll be able to connect to any of those dash data sets that are available, create any slicers or pivots that you want, and then deliver those to your leadership. So those are going to be the primary tools that you use. And the vast majority of our analytics community would fall into that range. Moving on to data knights, this is someone who is probably a subject matter expert of some sort. You're responsible for building queries and delivering them to a wide audience. A lot of the data preparation will be done in Alteryx, so the query building, any ETL that needs to be done, any structures that are being built, any kind of data cleansing, that will mostly be done in Alteryx. And a lot of you are already doing so. And then in terms of presenting the data and publishing it to people, a lot of that will most likely be done in Tableau. That's one of the easier tools to sort of drag and drop to create quick interactive visualizations or relatively small pivot of data. And then for our data wizards who maybe prefer to write SQL manually as opposed to visually, we have a tool called dbeaver that's available in the BI desktop. This allows you to explore the database. It has syntax highlighting, some autocomplete features. It allows you to debug and test your SQL. Once you're done writing the SQL, one of the options for presenting your data is Report Builder, which about half of our current published analytics report are built in. And so that allows you to deliver a report that has sort of filters that people can pick from. Also allows you to schedule subscriptions to send out to your users. And you can have relatively large pivots of data that can be exported to Excel in a nicely formatted manner. So a lot of our reports that are delivered in Excel start out in Report Builder, and that's generally how we generate a lot of those reports. And of course, as a data knight and a data wizard, you'll get a lot of use out of Excel and analytics as well, because all of our reports are being published to analytics. Do we need to pause for any questions at this point?
There's a couple questions that popped up. Kenvin, thank you for jumping in and answering some. Lori Bello had a question related to security. This is for anybody who didn't see the chat, but in the past, security was subject specific. Will this be the case? Kenvin responded, the security will be handled by the analytics site, which uses Edna roles. And then there's so I don't know if you want to expand on that at all, or if that covers it.
Yeah, I'll touch on that.
And is that covered later, or you mean now?
Yeah, let's touch on it real quick. So there are existing security groups. So for example, if you have access to student data right now, or if you have access to the enterprise enrollment and records area in analytics, you will already have access to the student data in Dash. So those groups are the same. We're going to be reusing those existing security groups. Good question.
And then there's another question from Neff Ahamira. Where does Studio fall among these tools?
Okay. So there is a tool called Hyperion Studio, which is sort of a standalone client. It is available through the BI desktop. However, it is also an obsolete end-of-life tool. So we do not recommend building any new content in there. There's no good way to share anything that's built in there through the analytics portal. But if you are familiar with it, comfortable with it, and you prefer to sort of do some exploration or quality assurance type work for your own personal use, it is one of the tools that's available for that.
Thanks, Stephen.
All righty. Next thing I'd like to go over is 3 resources that are available to you, sort of some tools. And this is mostly geared at sort of the subject matter experts who do have to rebuild queries. So here's some information specifically for you. This first one is a conversion tool that was developed by Kenvin Raymond. This allows you to actually search for a report that you might have out there in My Reports, and gives you information about what's in it without having to go log in and open up the report. There's 3 tabs in here. The first one gives you details on your query sections so that you can see which columns were selected. And the nice thing about this report is that you can copy and paste names and expressions right out of the report, so it may help out with your conversion efforts. The second tab is going to show you the actual SQL that was generated by your query so that you can copy that SQL out. And then the third tab gives you any calculated fields that you had created in the results section. So without having to go hunt those down and open them up, you'll be able to just copy those expressions right out of there. Now I will say that if you have not processed your report for quite some time, SQL and the results may not show up here, but if it's been processed at all recently by anyone, then this will be populated and you'll be able to pull it out. The next tool is something that I helped build a while back called the Query Cleaner. And of course, all of these links are going to be in the slide at the end, resources. This was originally designed to clean up query from my reports and get it ready for Toad data point, which we're no longer using, but it still may help in some cases. So just to make you aware that it's there. It cleans up a few common issues with the SQL that my reports generates. So for example, if you have multiple columns with the exact same name, it will rename the duplicates. If you had columns that didn't have an alias, it will add that for you, and a few other common issues that certain tools don't accept. So if you were to just copy the SQL from my reports and paste it straight into a tool like Report Builder, for example, there are a few common issues where it just wouldn't be able to accept that SQL until it's been cleaned up. So may or may not get much use out of this, but it is available. Finally, this is a new tool that I'm introducing. It's called the Alteryx Workflow Builder. Again, sorry, I couldn't come up with a better name for it. This is a pretty cool tool though. Basically what it does is it takes SQL that you get from anywhere. It could be from my reports, could be from dbeaver, could be from Toad. Any SQL that you have that you wrote or that you got from somewhere, you can put in here. And when you click download, it will actually download an Alteryx workflow that has your query already laid out as an in-database workflow on the canvas. So basically what that means is that if you're trying to build a query in Alteryx, you may not necessarily have to go build that from scratch, dragging each of the tools onto the canvas one at a time. Hopefully you'll be able to just paste your SQL in here and at least get a starting draft of your query in Alteryx. Obviously, it's probably going to need a little bit of cleanup. You'll want to add your own comments, maybe group things into some containers to make it more readable, but it'll at least get you part of the way there, building out your query so that it's ready for you to work with. So hopefully that'll save a lot of time with the tedious effort of trying to, pick table names and figure out which tool to use. So it handles almost all common syntax that we would see. So filtering, grouping, sorting, all of that kind of stuff is going to be handled for you. All right, so we're going to be wrapping up with some resources. So we do have a lot of Slack channels available, depending on what you're interested in. We do have some specific tool-related channels. So for example, if you have a question about Alteryx or Tableau or another tool specifically, those channels are the best place to go. We also put out regular announcements on our analytics announcements channel. And then we do also have some great community resources where you can ask questions about where to find data, or just talk about general tips or questions. And we do have, thankfully, a very active community that jump right in and are able to help out really quickly. So there's been a lot of great conversations on there. And then for my reports retirement specifically, we have a channel for that as well. So if you want to get quick feedback on questions or concerns, that's a good place to go. And that way everyone else can see the answers to your questions. And we'll be announcing any major updates through the announcements and the retirement community channels as we move along. If you do need additional attention or questions, again, Brandy Falls is my director and she's available if you want to contact her directly for additional concerns. And our team, the data success team, will be available throughout this entire process to make sure that things are going smoothly and make sure we address all of these sort of edge cases and concerns that come up along the way. Finally, as promised, here's a link to all of the resources that we've covered. So the 3 tools I just mentioned, the online training is a collection of PDFs on various different tools, how to do different things in specific tools. If you want to spend some time one-on-one with someone from my team, we do have office hours or consultations available. And then we also do have a frequently asked questions page. So questions like the question we got from Kim earlier and others like that, we'll be attempting to post there. So if you have a question that you think may have already been answered, you can always double check there and read through. We'll try to keep that up to date with any sort of high level questions that come up as we go. All right, so one last thing I want to do, and then we'll close with any remaining questions, is the poll. Let's do this one more time and see how everyone feels about it now that we've covered everything.
And they've shifted a lot, so that's great. There's still about 2% that are skeptical that it will never die. But that's better than it was before, so that's good.
Yeah, I hear you.
Give it a couple more minutes and then I'll release the polling results. Maybe not a couple minutes, a few more seconds. All right. Looks like everybody chimed in.
All righty, 40% confident that you'll be done by the deadline. That's awesome. And another 30% ready to go. Awesome.
Oh, you guys can all see it now.
Yeah, so that's really good to see. I really appreciate everyone's optimism and working together with us to get this done. I know it's not easy. So I'm gonna go ahead and just open it up with the remaining time that we have for any additional questions.
All right. Matthew Ecker says, if we are using Hyperion Studio regularly, is the next move to Alteryx? And is it Alteryx or Alteryx? That's
Alteryx. So Matthew, I would say that it depends on your specific use case. Kind of going back to the user levels, if you're using Hyperion Studio to consume reports that others have created for you, you'll just be going to analytics to consume those reports. As a creator of content, yes, Alteryx would probably be a good tool for you to create the content in going forward. That allows you to build queries visually, and you can either take the SQL that it generates and then present a report in Tableau or Report Builder, or if you prefer to sort of put those results into a table, we have ways that you can do that as well. And that gives you a lot of flexibility with how you want to deliver or consume the results of your query. But in general, the closest match I've found to what a lot of content creators in my reports were doing is a combination of Alteryx and Report Builder. So you basically create your query in Alteryx and then present your report in Report Builder using the SQL that it generates.
Great, thanks. Does that answer the question, Matthew? Great.
Good deal.
Other questions?
Hey, this is Ruben. I'm just going to ask it out loud.
Yeah.
Stephen, could you, yesterday Josh Johnson went over some things with the data mart, and it just seems like there are some parallels between the Dash and the data mart, just, from the surface level. Could you maybe explain how Dash might be the same or different from the data mart process that he kind of talked about a little bit yesterday?
Yeah, thank you, Ruben. There's definitely a little bit of overlap in terms of the concept of the data mart and Dash. So we're kind of thinking about this on a few different levels. So right now the data warehouse has a lot of transactional data, effective dated rows, codes that you have to look up the descriptions of, those kinds of things. And there have been some views that we've created in the past which have been very helpful. The data mart that Josh is heading up, and I'm sure he could explain it better, but is sort of the next layer up with enriched data in a very well named format that just sort of adds an extra layer with some of the friendly descriptions and things like that to make it a little bit easier to consume. But you would most likely still be joining up a few of those tables to get your end results. With Dash, we're attempting to take it even one level beyond that for the people who need it, and really trying to get as close to an end result as possible where you have a data set for a specific use case. So you have all of your descriptions there. You have one row per whatever level of granularity you're looking for. So you don't have to do any effective dating or any joining. In a lot of cases, you'll be able to just hit one table and get your report. Now, obviously, there will be some cases where you'll still want to join up a couple data sets, especially if you're trying to cross data areas into one report, but you'll be able to do that in Excel as well, or in any of the other tools. So that's the great thing, is even in Excel, you'll be able to join up multiple data sets without having a BI desktop at all.
Thank you. So it really does seem like, the landscape on where the analysts across the university are getting this data has really expanded from the data warehouse now to the data warehouse in Redshift, soon to be Dash, soon to be the data mart, possibly ODS, right? We've got multiple options of where to go get this type of data for our reports. Would that be an accurate statement?
Exactly. Yeah, there are a lot more options now that we're creating, both with the tools and the underlying structures, to try to serve all the different use cases with the right tool for the job.
Thanks, Stephen.
So I see the question from Rebecca on, if you did not create the report originally, but you adjusted it, what would be a way for you to move forward with that? So that is a little tricky in the sense that ideally, the person who did create the report would make that report dynamic enough that it meets your needs. So whether that's adding a couple extra filters for you or adding a couple extra columns that you need for your specific use case, I would really look to the subject matter expert who's producing that report to try to make it a little bit more robust or flexible so that it meets a wider range of needs and use cases. If that's possible, then that would be great for you, because you'd be able to just go, pick your extra filters and download the report and have your extra columns and just go from there. Not have to worry about tweaking it at the underlying query level. If that's not possible, or they're not willing to make those changes for whatever reason, then you most likely would need to create some sort of a version of the report on your own. Again, hopefully they would at least share the underlying data set through Dash so that you can use that as a starting point, and then just join the extra, couple tables that you need, or whatever the case may be. So we'd probably have to take that on sort of a case-by-case basis. And we would try to keep it to where you don't have to learn a whole lot of new tools, but just enough to get you what you need so that you can move forward.
Great.
All right.
There's an extra question from Rebecca as part of that, and what would be a recommended way to continue learning about both SQL and newer tools that for SQL, there's a lot of career edge that's open to faculty and staff at the university, and there's different types of, it depends on what the underlying system is. Stephen?
Right. In terms of learning about SQL or some of the tools, the training documents that we have out there are a great place to start. At least for me, I found one of the ways that I learn is just having an example use case and just diving into a tool. And then as you run into roadblocks of, oh, I'm not sure how to do this next step, just see if we already have a training document on that specific topic, or just running a search for how to do that. And then you sort of build up your competency with the tool as you go. But we do have a lot of training documents linked, especially on tools like Report Builder, where there definitely is a bit of a learning curve. And so we have screenshots and explanations of how to do some of those tasks, like how to add a filter, or how to make your connection, how to publish a report, things like that. Yeah, and sorry about the broken links. We will fix those today and make sure that those links are updated for you. Worst case, you can search using the Explore button on the analytics site. They are there, so, but yeah, we'll get those links fixed. Any other last minute questions? If not, we'll wrap up. All right, thank you to everyone for joining. I look forward to seeing what you all build. And as I said, we'll be available as needed. So thank you for attending today.
Thanks for the wonderful questions, and Kenvin responding, and everybody for being here. It was a great crowd. So thanks, Stephen, for presenting wonderful material about the transition and time frame and what's out there.
All right. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.